Welcome back. Today I have a chance to sit down with one of the greatest cycling coaches of all time, Mr. Joe Friel. Joe was seminal in my cycling journey. He was the author way back when of the Cyclist Training Bible. Since then, he's gone on to define an entire genre. We sit down today for a fast-moving, hard-hitting interview where we will show you how to build your own training plan. We will show you timeless principles, what worked back then, periodization, how to use intensity, duration and frequency across a training week, and show you what has changed over Joe's coaching career. It's my absolute honour to chat with Mr. Joe Friel. Pleasure to have legendary cycling coach Joe Friel back on the podcast. Joe.
Hi Anthony, how you doing?
Is this our second time, third time, fourth time? I can't even remember at this point.
Something like that. Something third or fourth. I think you're right.
Every time you're on, Joe, it's a wealth of knowledge for anyone that hasn't heard the backstory. Basically, Joe's original book, or original to me, I'm not sure if it was your first publication, Cyclist Training Bible, was really what kicked off cycling for me and my friends. And some of us went on to be pros and others just went on to be hobby cyclists and have a great relationship with the bike. But that book was so heavily formative in those years. We'd one copy of the book. Sorry about that, Joe, because we were so poor. We had it photocopied. We had it passed around. Every page had coffee stains and rabbit ears on it. It was a worn copy of Cyclist Training Bible. I'm actually probably due a new one at this point.
That's very kind of you. I won't tell my lawyer. It's okay.
All these years later, Joe, and I know you've the new book coming out, which congratulations about again. But you're widely credited in the industry as the coach who brought periodization concepts into mainstream cycling. Traditional periodization, as you taught it then, involved a base, a build, and a peak phase. Is that still valid all these years later?
It is, yeah. There have been some small changes, but along the way. But essentially, that is basically the way it's been for decades now, and continues to be that way. So yeah, you're right. That's still the way that athletes at all levels train. Has been shown to be very effective. So we keep on doing it.
So if an athlete has a goal, or maybe I'm starting in the wrong place, an athlete who's listening to this podcast now and they're thinking about setting up an annual training plan, what's their first step?
First step is decide if there's what the goal is. What are we trying to achieve? That's always the starting point for planning, is where are we going? If you don't have a solid goal in mind, it's really difficult to do any kind of planning or preparation, because you're just doing things at random and they have no purpose. So that's always the starting place, is what am I trying to achieve here?
If somebody only has, I get that a lot of us listen to the podcast will have a real specific goal. I want to finish unbound in a certain time. I want to win my age category in criterium. If I only have a goal that I can't really put my finger on what it is. I want to be faster. I want to be fitter. I want to be healthier. How do I approach building an annual training plan around something a little bit less concrete?
Right. Yeah, that's more difficult. The less concrete, the less detailed the goal is, the more difficult it is to come up with a plan to prepare for it. So when I'm coaching athletes, what I always want to know is exactly what we're trying to accomplish. And then I'm going to ask questions to dig down to that point. Because if it's vague, training becomes vague, and training doesn't have much purpose in that case. And so we don't really know where we're going, and we're not sure what's important. And it just is, it's kind of like a waste of time in many ways. It also tends to cause the athlete to have low motivation if they don't really know exactly what they're aiming for. You know, when I say what they're aiming for, I'm talking about an event that occurs on a given day, and what your outcome of that event is hope to be. What are you trying to achieve on that particular outcome? If you do all that, then we can really get very detailed. But if you don't do that, we're really kind of like just shooting at clouds. There's not much we can do to really say what we're trying to accomplish.
There's a scene in the children's book Alice in Wonderland where Alice asks the Mad Hatter, which way should I go? And the rabbit says, well, it depends where you want to where you want to go. It's just, well, I don't know where I want to go. And Matt had a reply, well, it doesn't matter which way you go then. I kind of think about training like that. If you don't know what you're training for, there's almost no correct training session to do this week or correct training load to do this month.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. And this is always a challenge. I understand that it's sometimes difficult when you're maybe a year out, some cases more than a year out. I've got an athlete I'm working with right now. We're talking about the end of the summer next year. You just finished off this season, and we're already talking about next, but we're talking about late summer next year. So we've got more than a year to do this, to prepare for it. And but that's the way that's where you wind up doing the best training, is when you have a long-term plan to aim for, and it's clear in your mind exactly what it is you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I chatted to Ed Clancy, the Olympic gold medal team pursuit rider for GB, and he was talking about the pressure of the home games in London 2012, the pressure on GB athletes. But that was one event 4 years in the making for that one particular event.
I agree. Yeah, I've coached a couple of people who were Olympic bound or had that dream to make the Olympic team. And again, the same thing. We were talking about 3 or 4 years in advance, and that's really even better than knowing next year. If I know 3 or 4 years in advance where we're going, I can do a fantastic job of getting this athlete ready for it. The less time we have, the more challenging it becomes to prepare for the event.
So you used to use this idea of A priority, B priority, and C priority goals. Do you still use that?
I sure do. Yeah, I run into that with athletes all the time. That's become pretty much the standard from what I gather with talking to both coaches and athletes, that they think in terms of A, B, and C. The challenge becomes, how do you define what is an A, what is a B, and what is a C? Too many athletes want to have everything as an A, and that won't work. You just can't have every event as an A. You're not really going to achieve anything. It's going to be pretty much a waste of time. So yeah, that's pretty much the standard today.
So what differentiates an A, a B, and a C? Is it the specificity of the training is more specific, for more tailored towards an A event, and a more prolonged taper, so they're hitting it in their freshest state?
It's true. We're going to build the season around. Well, let's back up one step. Yeah, I mentioned just a second ago how many A priority races you can have. You shouldn't have a whole lot. I would suggest that the very best situation is to have one A priority race this season. That would be by far the best situation, because that means, and not only is it the best, it's perhaps the only way to think if you're unsure. Let's just set up one A race. But if you've got several races that are important to you, then I would say the next step is you can have two. That's okay. But those two have to be separated, but probably 4 or 5 months apart, or they have to be back to back, 1 week and then the next week, back to back like that, either that way or spread out over several months. 3 A priority races becomes extremely difficult to do. It's possible. I've seen athletes do it, but it becomes very, very difficult to have 3 A priority races, and beyond 3 is impossible. It just becomes a waste of time for everybody.
Well, conceptually, the best way to think about this is, historically, it's proved very, very difficult for a rider to win the Giro d'Italia and the Tour de France. It's been done, but it's been historically done very, very infrequently. To win the Tour de France, the Giro, the Tour de France, and the Vuelta in one season, it's never been done.
It's a good reason for that. And we're seeing that reason right now with Tadej Pogačar. He said he's not going to do the Vuelta, whereas earlier in the season he said, yeah, he's going to do both the Tour and the Vuelta.
Yeah.
Now it's just a Tour, because what it does when you train for something like that, it takes a lot out of you. You are fried after, in this case, 3 weeks of preparing for a race. But it doesn't have to be a 3-week race to fry you. You can have an athlete who's training for an A race at someplace during the season, and the more time they put into preparing for that race, the more of a burden it becomes. And eventually they begin to realize that if there's a second A race, it's going to be extremely difficult to do, maybe even impossible, which is what Toddy is finding out.
So To continue this idea of building out this training plan for someone, so we've set our A priority. We're going to have one goal for the season, or it's our A priority race. Now, how do you think about, if we back that up, how do you think about building the blocks leading up to that?
Yeah, first of all, I'm going to work backwards. So we're going to have a taper or a peaking period, which is going to maybe last at the most 3 weeks before the race, until the race day. For cyclists, more than likely 2 weeks is going to be adequate. For some sports, running, you may need a little bit more than that, because running really pounds the body a lot. And that, therefore, the athlete has to make sure they're recovered from all that pounding. So we may go 3 weeks in that case, but 2 weeks is going to be enough for most athletes in cycling, and for many other sports too, swimming, Nordic skiing, so forth. So that's a starting place, that we're going to have this 2 week period roughly before the race. Then we're going to have what I call a build period, a specific training period, time when we're doing workouts that are very much like the race. And that's probably going to last somewhere in the neighborhood of about 8 weeks. Could be 10 weeks, depends on the athlete a little bit, but that's going to be typically what we do. So there, what we've defined is we've looked at roughly 10 to 12 weeks up until the race is this latter portion of the season. Yeah. Everything before that mostly call the base period, and that should be very long. The longer we can make the base period, the better off the athlete will be on race day. You really cannot have too much base. You can have too much build. You certainly can do that, and you can certainly have too much peak or taper, but you can't have too much base. So the more the base period we have, the better the more fitness the athlete is going to carry into the general. It has a specific preparation period, the build period, and that means their training is going to be much more focused. They're going to get a lot more accomplished, and so forth. But the challenge with this is always the same thing with this issue, and I've talked with athletes about this, is they don't want to wait that long until they start doing hard workouts. They want to start doing them today, and that's a problem, which we can come back to later on. But that's a challenge I run into with athletes, is they want too much in the way of intensity too early in the season.
And I think the science has really come back around to validate the approach that you advocated all those years ago. Like, it's just seems unequivocal now how much easy riding we need. Some coaches are 80-20. Steven Seiler's kind of popularized that. But I talk to World Tour coaches on the podcast, and Vasilis Anastopoulos springs to mind, who's the head of performance at Astana. He's saying up to 90% of his rides in that base period are really easy. And he's calling easy zone 1 and zone 2, not just zone 2 rides.
I do exactly the same thing. I believe in zones 1 and 2 are easy. Everything above that, 3, 4, 5, for example, are all hard. And there are times to do these hard workouts, and there are times when you shouldn't be doing these hard workouts. The challenge I run into with almost every athlete I talk with is it's not hard enough. They believe the only way to become better is to suffer. That leads to better performances. Now, at some point in the season, that may be true, but in the base period, that is not the case. In fact, it has the opposite effect. The athlete actually winds up accomplishing less of what we really want to accomplish if they try to make the workouts too hard. So this is always a challenge. When I work with any athlete, they always are going to say to me, can I do a list a little bit harder than what this workout says? You've got me down doing zone 2. Can I do zone 3 instead? And they don't get the message. The message is we're trying to make it easy, because there are benefits that come from that do not come from higher intensities. Zone 1, zone 2 accomplish things that 3, 4, and 5 don't accomplish. But the athlete doesn't feel they're accomplishing what they want, which is more suffering. So consequently, I've got to really, it almost always comes down to almost like an argument that you must do these workouts. Otherwise, you need to find a different coach, because I really am a coach if all you want to do is hard workouts all the time.
Yeah, I think what I see is the attraction for hard workouts. It seems to maximize fitness very fast, but then you also plateau very fast on it. So someone that's like, if you took two athletes and they both want to train for an event that both of them have very little to no training done, and the event is like 6 weeks away, a stupidly close time away, the athlete who just smacks the hard work all the time, he seems to have better short-term performance that I've seen, but then they hit a ceiling that they're never able to break past. And the only way to break past that is to totally reboot and come back to, like you talk about, starting to build long, boring, slow base miles.
Yeah, exactly right. And you hit the nail on the head there. The athlete needs to, if you just, I've known many athletes who skip the base period, and they decide, that for whatever reason, they're not going to train during those months, which is usually the winter months. They're not going to really train. They're just going to like mess around a little bit here and there on the bike. When it comes time for their high intensity training to begin, something like 10, 12 weeks before the race, now they're going to go out and train frequently, and they're going to train hard. But what they've done is they've given up all the fitness you can gather by doing easy, low intensity workouts. There's a lot that goes on there physiologically. The changes that take place there do not take place when you're doing high intensity workouts. You're giving up some of your fitness by doing this. So it doesn't make sense to athletes because they see hard workouts as being the way you get to become race ready. But they don't understand that to become really truly race ready, you've got to have a big base of aerobic endurance. You've got to have that. If you don't have that, everything else is just icing on is no cake. It's just icing. All you got is icing. You don't have a cake at all. So you can perform on icing, but this is very, very thin. If we look at, for example, if we take just VO2 max, and we look at VO2 max, what happens with VO2 max over the course of the season? VO2 max is going to be a little bit lower, not a lot lower, just a little bit lower early in the season. And as you start the base period, it starts to increase, even though all you're doing is easy workouts. Most athletes don't think that's happening. They think it doesn't really change until they start doing hard workouts. That is not the case. The easy workouts are also building aerobic endurance, VO2 max. And that's going to increase, that's going to continue throughout the season. But when you get to the build period, where you're finally starting to do some high intensity stuff, now we're going to get this little bump in your VO2 max. Right at the very end, it's going to bump up. It's going to be just a few percentage points, a couple percentage points higher than what you accomplished with the base training, with the easy volume type of training. So you're going to have this little bitty fitness change taking place up here with VO2 max intervals, for example, and all the stuff you did before that is going to make this little step a little bit higher. You're going to be a little bit stronger because of that. Without that base period built in, all we've got is just this little bitty piece of fitness, VO2 max, you developed up here. And what happens eventually is when the season comes to an end and you back off the training, which you should do, what's going to happen is that's going to just disappear really quickly. That's going to go bam, but this is going to continue to stay there. So this is really the heart of your training, is all of this base training you do.
So I remember, I think it was your original book. Some of this is just burnt into my brain. You had an expression that the wider your base, the more volume in your base, the higher your potential peak. And I think that's a great way of thinking about it, because that for me differentiates long-term and short-term thinking. Now it makes sense why I'm being patient in the build-up, because it's allowing me to create a higher peak to my, metaphorical building later in the season.
Yeah, that was not my idea. That's repeating something which has been around for a long, long time before I even became an athlete. It's the pyramid idea. And we've got this pyramid of fitness we're building. This is the peak up here. This is where the race is going to be. It's at this end. And early in the season, the base of this pyramid is all your aerobic training, zones 1 and 2, especially a lot of that. And up here, this little bitty peak at the end is going to be the high intensity, the interval stuff, the threshold stuff. That's going to be this little peak at the end. But you're trying to accomplish this, but it starts by building a platform on which this pyramid operates.
So let's dive into the base period and talking about how do we make up this base period. We'll take an athlete who has, quite a common working athlete, has 8 to 10 hours a week training. How do you think about the distribution of intensity, duration, and training session frequency? How should I slot those 3 different pieces into this puzzle?
Yeah, it starts out with a slight change taking place over time. Let's go way back. So now we're talking about, let's say we're talking about November and December, and the A race isn't until next August. That's the A priority race. So what we're going to do in this period is just and what has happened before these winter months is the athlete has taken some time off, which is very good. That's exactly what the athlete should do. You get not only a physical break, but a mental break from training. And as we start back into it, there are going to be a few weeks where the athlete is going to be doing general training, cross training. That would be a great way to start out. And we don't need a whole lot of it at this time. So the athletes may be doing 60% of what they're going to be doing at the peak of their season, but that's going to be very easy. And it's going to be things that are out of the ordinary for the athlete. Cyclists, maybe the athlete goes out for some ski mountaineering, some doing some long, slow ski sessions during the winter months. Or it could be running. There could be lots of things the athlete takes up and decides to do. It depends on what you enjoy. That's really what it comes down to. When athletes ask me what should they do during the cross-training season, I ask them, what do you enjoy doing the most? Whatever that thing is, that's what we'll do. Because if I tell you to do something you don't enjoy, what's more than likely going to happen is you're going to miss a lot of workouts. You're going to bypass it because you don't like it. But if you say, man, I really enjoy running, let's start doing some running then. So we're going to start off doing that, but it's not going to be a lot of volume. It's not going to be every day. And we'll begin to mix in some cycling with that as we go along. And so by the time we get through this early preparation period and we start into base period, now the athlete is going to start doing things which are which are quite a bit more specific to the event, cycling. And so now we're going to start getting more time on the bike, and that's going to gradually increase over the course of the base period, which could last like 12 weeks. More would be better.
But just sorry to interrupt you, Joe, just to jump in on that one. When you say, we talk about the base period, so we have that preparation phase, the training to train phase where we're mixing in cross training. We get out of that and we're into the base or general preparation phase. If I have 10 hours a week, what's the allocation of that? Am I better off doing like 2 5-hour rides and having 5 rest days? Am I better off doing 2 hours for 5 days and having 2 days off? Or what's the perfect, assuming I've no commitments, what's the perfect distribution of 10 hours?
Yeah, I don't think there really is a perfect that fits everybody, but there are ways of thinking about this. Let's say you do have 10 hours, and I'd like to see the athlete riding frequently. Now, what does frequently mean? I don't know. I got to talk to the athlete. What's your lifestyle like? What all you got going on in your life? Let's say the athlete has 5 days a week they can ride. I'd like to see them out there 5 days a week, and we're going to average 2 hours a day. But some of the rides will be shorter than 2 hours, and some will be longer than 2 hours. But we're going to build up to those longer rides. We're not going to start off doing 3-hour rides. We're going to start with 1.5 hours, and maybe the athlete is only doing something like 8 hours a week. And we're slowly going to bring that up to 10 hours by making some of the rides longer. But we're going to keep this consistency going to five rides per week. I think that's the starting place we want to always achieve. Is we want to always be having this idea that I need to be training frequently and regularly. If we do those, then the athlete is consistent, and consistency is what produces results. It's not how many hours you ride; it's how consistently you do those rides.
What do the Giro d'Italia, Stage Slayer, Mads Pedersen and half the professional peloton have in common? Well, they're all turning to Nomio, the natural performance enhancer proven to reduce lactate buildup during intense efforts. In the 2025 Giro d'Italia, Pedersen's form was undeniable. The Danish star surged to 4 stage victories. This was a major leap in form from his previous season, and a key part of this preparation and performance was Nomio. Developed by the same researchers who discovered the performance power of dietary nitrate. You know those beetroot shots that half the peloton were using? Nomio is clinically proven to lower lactate levels, reduce oxidative stress, improve training adaptations, and deliver a noticeable boost from the very first time you take it. Riders are reporting bigger threshold power, fresher legs mid-race, and quicker recovery, all from a formula made with just 3 natural ingredients: broccoli sprouts, lemon, and sugar. Whether you're racing at the front or you're smashing local segments, Nomio helps you get more out of every ride. Take it before key sessions or races for an immediate edge, or take your training to the next level and get more out of your hard work. Go to drinknomio.com, that's Nomio, and check out this game-changing supplement. Details are in the episode show notes or description down below. like we've heard this and we've referenced it already, the idea of 80-20, 80% of your rides being easy. And I think easy is defined as left of LT1, which in Training Peaks terms is zone 1 and zone 2. So if we're saying 80% easy, a question I often get is, okay, if I'm time crunched, do I still do 80% of my stuff easy? If I can only do 6 hours a week, if I can only do 7 hours a week in that base period, am I still aiming to do 80% of that stuff easy?
Yes, you are. And at some point it becomes very difficult. At some point we're getting to the challenge where the athlete only has an hour and a half. And for example, let's say we've moved to the build period now, the specific preparation period. And so the athlete needs to be doing some hard workouts and some long, easy maintenance workouts. And then we've got to start getting real creative. So let's say the athlete now is going to be riding 4 days a week easy and 2 days a week hard. But they've only got like an hour and a half each time. That's not going to be too difficult. It's going to be 4 easy workouts, 2 hard workouts. But what if they've only got 4 workouts they can do a week? How do we do it then? Well, in that case, what I would have the athlete do is would probably do every one of those workouts would have at least an hour of low intensity, zone 1 and 2. But 2 of the workouts would finish the last half hour with high intensity, zones 3, 4, 5. That would be, so we're going to do 2 workouts a week where we start the workout in zones 1 and 2, but we finish the workouts in zones 3, 4, and 5. And the other workouts that week are all going to be in zones 1 and 2. So that's something that's going to happen a little bit later on. In the base period, I'm really not too concerned about all this stuff because all I'm really interested in is the athlete being on the bike frequently and regularly. If we can do that and we can build slowly, gradually build more time on the bike, then the athlete's going to reap the benefits of the base period.
What do you think about for somebody that's time crunched, the idea of supplementing his training? Say he or she only has 6 to 8 hours a week, but they have an ability to commute into work, or they have an ability to maybe even walk into work. Can we count this as zone 1?
We most certainly can. They most certainly can. The athlete should be doing anything they can to build fitness. Walking builds fitness. It's been shown to be very effective, quite honestly. The research done on walking shows that it improves aerobic capacity. It makes lots of physiological changes to the body that are beneficial. For example, the left ventricle of your heart, which is the kind of the key to aerobic capacity, becomes larger because of low intensity training. And the larger the left ventricle becomes, that means, and the more powerful it becomes, that means the more blood it can shoot to the muscles when it's time to really call on getting red blood cells to the muscle tissues. So it really can be a big help. Riding to work would be perfect. If I can just get the athlete to ride to work every day, ride home from work, that would be gigantic. That of course, it depends on what they've got available, how far they have to go, and what the traffic is like, and there's lots of other issues here. But in general, yes, riding the bike to work is a fantastic thing to be doing to supplement other training the athlete may be doing. So I can ride to work 5 days a week, and I can ride on Saturdays. I can do my workout on Saturday. Great, let's do that. That's going to really do a lot to build your fitness.
I had a coach in 2012. Actually, he coached me and the decathlon sprinter Sam Bennett at the same time. I was racing in France that year. And I was frustrated at the time because I didn't understand it. But in the winter period, he had me doing these building up to, but walks, 5, 6, 7, 8 hour walks at points. And I was losing my mind because I didn't really understand the benefit of them. And it's only been in years since, and more specifically on the podcast, where I've got a chance to chat with great coaches like yourself and physiologists, and they all nearly unanimously endorse the benefits of walking.
I agree. My wife and I do this a lot. Even in the summertime, we'll get up early and do a walk 3 miles or so and get a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
And walk back and then go for a ride. It really does a great deal for your aerobic fitness. It really is quite beneficial. Most athletes, again, it's not hard enough for most athletes. They think it's not, therefore, if it's not hard, it means it's no good. That's not the case. It's accomplishing things that you can't accomplish with hard workouts. So it's quite beneficial. Yeah, I'd highly recommend that.
Yeah, I've seen data on the number one thing for determining an athlete's long-term outcome of them hitting their goals, it's consistency. And the number one thing which undermines consistency is intensity. When people do too much intensity, they break down either mentally or physically, and then they lose the consistency. So from that, you can surmise that the number one thing to stop people hitting their goals is intensity.
It's true. I agree with 100%. Let's think about it this way. Consistency is critical. It's very important. I would much rather have the athlete doing the wrong workouts consistently rather than the right workouts inconsistently.
Yeah.
So consistency is the key. I don't care if whatever you do, let's make it consistent. Let's do it regularly and frequently. And
I think it's the cheat code for life.
Yes, it is. It's pretty much the way life is. It's because you need to be frequent and consistent with whatever you do in life. Training is no different. So, but that's the number one problem I run into with athletes is they say they didn't achieve their goal, and they trained really hard. And we start going back and digging into it. What I find out is they missed workouts every week, several workouts, and all they think they have to do is do like 2 or 3 really hard workouts, and therefore they ought to become Superman. It doesn't work like that. You're better off doing a lot of long, slow distance workouts than you are doing 2 or 3 very hard workouts if you really want to prepare for an event. So consistency is the key.
Back in the first year, I was illegally photocopying your book. I remember building my training plan, and I can still remember it now. I was a student, I was ambitious, I had a lot of time, and I'd set out week 1 was 14 hours, and it progressed based on a weekly available time. So that was the adaptation each week. So I went from 14 hours to 16 hours to 18 hours, and then a decompression week. And then the next block might have went from 16 to 18 to 20 and a decompression block. It built like that. Do you still think about building these blocks in terms of step up in duration measured in hours, or have you now moved to kilojoules because that seems to be getting more popular?
It can be done either way. Kilojoules works very nicely, especially if you're a scientist or have a scientific leaning. Most athletes don't want to gather information about kilojoules because it's kind of vague. They like to gather information about hours. How many hours did I train? And it's an obvious number that really means just as much as probably anything else you can do, because it has we have more experience with the word hour than we do with the word kilojoule. But kilojoules are fine. If you want to train based on kilojoules, that's great. No problem at all.
And I've heard you talking about the idea of a 9-day training cycle for busy athletes. How does that work?
Yeah, that's one that I did develop several years ago about athletes, especially athletes who need frequent rest. Older athletes, especially, 50, 60, 70, 80-year-olds probably need more rest than 20, 30, 40-year-olds. And they need that rest more frequently. By training a 9-day pattern, what the athlete can do is they can do 2 days, which are hard or long, whatever time of the season we're in, and then a third day, which is very easy, or even a day off on the third day, and then go back to that pattern again. So we do three-day periods like that. That becomes this 9-day pattern. And I'll typically have the athlete most athletes will do that twice, so they wind up with 36 days, or they can't pick, not 18 days, and then we're going to take a rest break, and maybe 4 or 5 days after that, and then start all over again. It works really well physiologically. The problem is when it comes to lifestyle. The first time you have to do a 5-hour ride, and it's a Monday morning, you're supposed to be at work at 8 o'clock, it's not going to work out. So that's the challenge with doing this. It works nicely for retired people because they basically have
or unemployed people.
Yeah, they can use their time in much more lenient ways. They can do what they want. But if you have to be someplace at a given time on a given day, it's not going to work out. So it really depends on the athlete's lifestyle.
I was chatting to Dr. Sam Impey. You might know him, but Sam advises through an app that he's built called Hexus. A lot of the World Tour teams now prescribed to both him and David Dunn's nutrition philosophy. And we've seen off the back of his 2016 study, I think it was, called Fuel for the Work Required, we've seen a massive change in carbohydrate consumption for both pro athletes and amateur athletes. I'm thinking about that first book that we keep referencing, Cyclist Training Bible, to your most recent book. Nutrition has obviously changed an awful lot in that period. But with regard to the kind of training plan we're building out here, what are the other big changes you've noticed over that span of, I guess it's 20 years nearly?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's changed quite a bit. And you're right. There's a lot going on right now with, for example, the number of calories an athlete can take in. But I need to warn people that, we're talking about what the pros are doing is gigantic calories. But they didn't start off doing that. They kind of like built into that. There's an adaptation period the athlete has to go through before they can really do that without becoming sick at their stomach. And for most athletes, we don't really need all that. If you're doing 4 and 5 hour stage races, daily stage races, that's something you really need to think about, because it's going to be, you need a lot of energy to come in during a race like that. If you're doing a 1 hour criterium or 2.5 hour road race, don't worry about that. You're going to be fine just taking in what you've been doing in the past, more than likely, using the old standards for calories. So
but also, and what Sam was really keen to note for me is, this is measured in absolute, but we use values like 120 grams of carbohydrates per hour, but it needs to be relative to your output. So like some of these guys, if you look at the front of the race in Unbound now, like I chatting with Alex Wild, I think he averaged close to 300 watts for 8 hours. If you're going out for an 8 hour ride, it's most likely that you're not, unless you're a World Tour rider, it's most likely you're not averaging 300 watts for your 8 hour ride. Your fueling requirements aren't the same as his fueling requirements on an 8 hour ride, because he's producing so much more power. There's a higher fueling requirement for that ride.
No question about it. You're exactly right. Yeah, the more powerful the athlete is, the more calories they need. The longer the event, the more calories the athlete needs. You combine both of those things, long and highly intense, the athlete's going to need a lot of calories. If you're not in that category, then this is something you don't need to be worried about. You can keep on doing probably what you've been doing up until this point, but you got to make sure you're doing it. You just can't get by on water alone. I run into athletes who want to lose weight, and then what they do is they want to burn as many calories as they can during the day and replace as few calories as possible. That's usually not a good idea. Usually the athlete's going to wind up crashing and burning because of that. So you need to be careful with this, but you also need to know exactly what your body needs, and then go about trying to design a plan to get you there on race day, especially.
So outside of nutrition, what else has changed?
Yeah, one of the more recent changes that I'm having a lot of fun with is something this guy it's still up in the air what the name should be. It seems to be becoming durability, but has been called stamina and resilience. These are terms that are being used by people who, especially sports scientists, who've been talking about this. And I really like the idea. This is something I wouldn't say I came up with the idea, but this was something I started thinking about. I think it was 2019. I was watching the Tour de France, and I forgot who it was right now. Someplace in my notes I wrote it down. But there was a break of 5 athletes in a very, very long stage. And they held 300 watts basically for close to 5 hours. And finally, they all dropped away except one guy. And one guy was left to finish. He won the stage. He averaged 300 watts. But you have to realize that those guys, their FTP is somewhere around 400 watts. So he was riding at 75% of FTP, which doesn't sound all that hard. Any one of us here could go out and ride for some period of time at 75% of FTP, but do it for 5 hours. That's a little bit different situation. Now we're talking about a guy who's built great durability. He can hang in there for a very, very long time, which most athletes can't, as evidenced by the fact that 4 of the 5 riders did not make it to the finish line. He got there all by himself because he had such great durability. This can be trained. It's highly trainable. And there are various ways of training and various ways of checking it. but it's a good thing to do, I think, in terms of working on especially long events that the athlete has. Long events mean more than an hour long.
I think most of us understand the theory of specificity in that, if I want to get good at a 10-mile time trial, I can go away and I can do a bunch of threshold style efforts. But it feels more like opaque, the idea of training durability. How do you think about training durability? What goes into it?
Yeah. Well, the starting place is to decide how good the athlete's durability is. Some athletes just seem to have really good durability and others don't. I think that's the key to this rider I'm talking about, is he's been around the sport for so many years by that point in 2019 that he had built great durability, and that showed up when it came race day for that particular event. But otherwise, he was not a contender. He was never somebody who contended for the podium on any given stage, because he was a long race guy is what he was.
So how would you test durability? Like a 20-minute test, a 4-hour ride, and then see what your 20-minute power is at the end of a 4-hour ride? Or would you use kilojoules, or is there a different test protocol?
Yeah, that's the basic idea is good. I think 4 hours is a little bit on the long side for most athletes. They don't really need to do 4 hours unless they're training for something like what the pros are doing. But let's say we do this. The athlete rides for an hour in zone 2 as a warm-up. And then we go to a certain location, certain piece of the course that mimics what we need to be doing for the athlete. For example, it could be a hilly course, it could be a flat course, it could be a climb. And the athlete does a 20-minute effort at a given heart rate. Let's say it's zone 4, just below FTP, for 20 minutes. Then goes out and rides for another half hour, comes back to the very same course again, the 20-minute course, rides another 20 minutes, exactly the same heart rate. Then what we do is we compare the power output for those two episodes, those two intervals. And what we'd like to see is that the second one is no more than 3% lower than the first one. If it's more than 3%, it catches my attention. The athlete's durability is not very good. But if they can keep it within 3%, then we've got pretty good durability already. Most athletes, when I have them do this, they don't have very good durability. They drop off quite a bit in the second effort, because now we've built some fatigue. They've been riding for a couple of hours, and now it's showing up on this second effort. So that becomes one way of doing this. I'll do that early in the build period to see where they are durability wise. And then we'll do it periodically, like every third or fourth week, we'll do it again to see how they're coming along.
And how do you fix poor durability?
How do you fix it? You do long intervals training, especially zones 4, just below threshold. Long efforts, by long I mean like 20 minutes. So we're going to do 20-minute intervals with 5-minute recoveries. And we're going to do an X number of these depending on the athlete. And that becomes our durability training. And then again, we have a long warm-up, maybe an hour before we start those intervals. Then we do the intervals, and then a long cool down, and we see how the intervals went. That's another indicator of what our athletes' durability is like, is if those 20-minute efforts remain fairly constant all the way through, or if they begin to taper. So we're looking for that sort of thing too. So it's another way of getting feedback within a workout rather than doing a test.
Have you looked much at heat training? It seems to be quite the in vogue thing with the Tour de France riders, World Tour highest level at the moment.
Yeah, heat training is really something quite beneficial. I talk about this in this new book, that it's one of those things you can do to build higher performance, especially VO2 max as an element of performance. In the past, we thought heat training was just something to get you ready for a hot day's race, and which is true, it will. That's one of the things you're doing. But you're also building some benefits there that have to do with VO2 max. But here's the clincher. What you've got to do in one of these long rides when you're trying to build VO2 max is you've got to stay hydrated. If you don't stay hydrated, you accomplish just the opposite. You actually train your body not to be very good at VO2 max. Because the less when you're sweating and you sweat out a lot of fluids in your body, what happens is you're winding up getting rid of a lot of blood at the same time. That's where a lot of that fluid is coming from. Is from your blood, as the amount of blood in your body decreases, your VO2 max also goes down. So what we need to do is stay hydrated so that your blood stays fairly constant in terms of how much fluid you have running through the veins. And that's going to help to boost your VO2 max just by doing that. So heat training can be very effective for the athlete, but it's more than just drinking. It's also being the experience of challenging the body to deal with the stressor, which is something outside of what most athletes are trying to do. Most athletes try to avoid the heat. It's actually a very good thing for you, not year-round, but at certain times of the year, it's highly beneficial.
Yeah, and I actually read a paper on this last week to echo your point on hydration. But interestingly, it said it's hydrating with room temperature fluid, that if you hydrate with cold fluid, it blunts the heat adaptation response.
Good. It's good. Very good point. Yeah, I hadn't thought in terms of that, but you're right. It would do exactly that, because that's one of the things the athletes do when they're trying to cool off, is drink like a slushy. Something that's really cold to cool the inside. Good point.
Roadman, whether you're a weekend warrior or a world tour rider, the right tools can make all the difference. Enter 4i's Precision 3 Plus Power Meter, the latest innovation from 4i, designed to help you reach peak performance. The Precision 3 Plus Power Meter is a compact yet powerful unit. It weighs just 9 grams and it's packed with features that set it apart, including integration with Apple's Find My network, giving you the peace of mind by letting you track your power meter wherever it is. Plus, you've got up to 800 hours of battery life. We all know that accuracy is key, and 4i's delivers a groundbreaking plus or minus 1% accuracy thanks to their unique 3D strain gauge technology. For those seeking even more data, the Precision 3 Plus Pro Power Meter offers dual-sided power meter metrics, giving you detailed insights into pedaling efficiency, torque effectiveness, and left-right balance. 4i's offers versatile product options to suit your needs. Choose from ride-ready power meters with pre-installed units on Shimano cranks, or up for factory-installed power meter, where you send in your crankset for a custom installation. Ready to elevate your cycling game? Trust 4i's Precision 3 Plus Power Meter. Precision, performance, and peace of mind all in one. Learn more by visiting 4iiii.com. That's 4iiii.com. I'm going to put that in the description down below. I think to finish up, Joe, let's do a couple of rapid fire questions, because I had someone on LinkedIn I was putting out a while ago. I'm interviewing Joe Friel, and a couple of people came back with some questions, so we'll rapid fire through them. What was your FTP at age 60, 70, and 80?
Well, at 60, we didn't have FTP, so I wasn't able to measure it. That was a fairly new concept. When I was 60, it was the early 2000s, and at that time, the term FTP had not been invented yet. But at 70, mine was 269, I recall, because I was just talking to my son about this the other day. I was telling him what to expect as he gets older. We're talking about his FTP, which is pretty good right now, but it doesn't stay that way as you get older. It becomes embarrassing, in fact, as you get older.
And what was the drop off from 70 to 80?
Oh, man, that's the embarrassing part. I'm now 81, and I won't give you numbers because, again, it's too embarrassing to talk about numbers when you're this old. But let's just say it's a big percentage of what I was at age 70. The numbers have gone down considerably, and that stands out because I have a hard time staying with group rides anymore, so it's a real challenge.
I love that. Okay, next question. You have one day off, nothing on the cards at all. You can do one cycling training session. What is that session?
It's going to be a long, easy ride. If I've got a lot of time to ride, I'll just go out and put in a long, I want to see the scenery. I want to see what's going on around the city and enjoy myself.
Exact same for me. The biggest training myth that you still see circulating?
Biggest training myth? Well, the big one we've already talked about, which is that the athlete believes that the key to fitness is high intensity. That's the only thing you have to do is high intensity, and therefore you become much faster. And that is so wrong. It seems like I talk about this all the time when I'm talking with not only athletes, but even with podcasters, is that It's not that way. It's hard workouts are not the key. By itself. You've got to be doing the easy stuff also.
The most underrated training metric.
Most underrated training metric, efficiency factor. This is something I came up with many years ago, and it's a good indicator of how the athlete's aerobic fitness is coming along. Basically, it's normalized power divided by heart rate. So it's how many watts you can create per beat is what you come up with. And we want to see that number rise. If you're doing a lot, if your aerobic fitness is improving, this number will rise. So what I tell athletes to do is do a long, easy ride today, like a zone 2 or whatever you're doing for a long, easy ride. Look and see what your EF was, efficiency factor, normalized power divided by heart rate. That is shown on Training Peaks just as a normal analysis data point. Take that and then count back 8 weeks in your training, find a very similar workout and see what the EF was on that day. What we should see is your EF is increasing as your training goes on. If it's not increasing, there's something wrong someplace, or you're at the end of the season and we've kind of like plateaued, which is not unusual. But that's a really good marker of how your aerobic fitness is coming along.
Yeah, I love that. It's one metric that really helps you tap into that kind of aerobic decoupling as well.
Yeah, and decoupling tells you what's going on as far as it's normalized power divided by average power. And the more spiked your training is, the higher this number is going to become. So if you're training for something like a time trial, for example, you don't want to be spiking on that. You want to be very steady on that. So we'd like to find the decoupling is very, very low number, less than 10%. That's what we're aiming for in that case. Triathletes the same way. Road cyclists ride with a fairly high decoupling. 1.25, 1.3 is not unusual at all.
The best cycling performance tip you could give to a racer in a single sentence.
Pay attention to what's going on around you.
I love that one. Joe, thank you very much for your time. What's the best way for me and everyone else to get a copy of your new book? Because I promise I'm not going to photocopy it this time. I will actually be buying it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Best way is probably just to go to any place where you buy books. You can find it. It's called Joe Friel High Performance Cyclist, and you can find it. If you go to Amazon or any place else, you'll be able to find the book. So it's quite easily found. It'll be on my website. Should be on there today, joefrieltraining.com. But it should be able to find it fairly easily.
How many books have you authored now?
I just finished number 19.
That's unbelievable, Joe. Any more in the pipeline, or are you calling it quits?
No, I've got things I'm thinking about. I haven't come up with a solid idea yet, but I've got something that really interests me, and we'll see if it interests publishers also. That's the key. If you got to find something not only do you like, the publisher has to like also.
Yeah, I love it. Joe, thank you so much for your time. Absolute legend and a pure privilege to chat with you again.
Thank you, Anthony. Enjoyed it.